reading a bunch of books from John C. Maxwell. He writes a lot of personal development stuff. And this idea came from a book called How Successful People Think. And it's right at the beginning of a chapter, and it's just kind of a little blurb, and he doesn't really get into detail about it. And I think it's because it doesn't need a whole lot of detail. But the idea is that your ideas have a short shelf life. And he says you must act on them before the expiration date. And I'd never really thought of that, but I've experienced this, and I know we've all experienced this. And he quotes a World War I flying ace, Eddie Rickenbacker. He said, "I can give you a 6-word formula for success. Think things through, then follow through." And so I thought that was pretty cool. I highlighted it in the book, and then I started thinking a lot about it. And I started realizing how much I experienced this in my life. So I sort of wrote out a bunch of stuff here. Like one thing that happens all the time is I'll be out and about and I'll have an idea for an episode for this podcast. And while I'm thinking about it, I have all this energy and I have all these ideas and all this stuff is flowing. And so I'll just get out my phone and I'll jot down a couple of notes. And I just assume, because I'm feeling all this energy about the idea and I'm all excited about it, that when I look back and I see my notes, that all that shit is going to come back, but it almost never does. And not only that, a lot of times I'll write stuff down, and by the time I get back to it, I don't even remember any of those things. I'll read it and I'll be like, I don't have any recollection of what I was thinking when I wrote this down. Like I'll just write like something very simple, because in the moment I'm having all these great ideas. And I think it's also, you've probably had it happen where you're about to fall asleep and you have an idea and you're like, oh, okay, I got to remember that in the morning. And then that shit is just gone. You never remember it again. And so after I read that, I started really thinking about it. So since I'm naturally a procrastinator, I think what ends up happening is if I put off those ideas till later, then I don't have that same energy when I come back to it. So then as I was thinking about it, I was like, how many great ideas do you have throughout your life that you never, ever remember? And you don't even remember you had them because you didn't act on them, and those are gone. So I'm wondering, I started thinking about like how many of there could be these like life-changing ideas that I had that had I acted on them, like the whole scope of my life would be different, like, I don't know. I just started really diving in and trying to think about this. And so I was doing a little reading, and I was curious how many thoughts you have per day. And somebody wrote that scientists figured out that you have roughly 6,000 thoughts per day. And I'm sure some people have more and some people have less. But like out of all those thoughts, they said a lot of them are repetitive. But like you got to have all these really good ideas throughout that time. And so like I was saying, like when you do have a good idea and you feel all that energy and then you want to come back to it, it's hard to get that energy back, while you're in the moment of like coming up with all those ideas, all these new ideas and connections flow really freely. And then the longer you wait to act on it, it sort of diminishes. So a lot of that is happening with me in the podcast, which I mentioned, but I started thinking about graph, and I started looking through my current sketchbook, and I was like flipping through, and I would see these drawings that I had forgot that I even did. And it was like, I tend to kind of, my style sort of evolves slowly. So like, I'll start doing some new shit new for me. Like I remember when I first started doing bevels, or when I started doing these like block letters, like I still do the same shit that I came up with some years back, but like it slowly evolves and new details and new shit kind of comes out. And so when I was looking through my sketchbook, I saw drawings that like I'd forgotten that I made, and I could tell that like I was on my way to kind of evolving that style into something else. And then I didn't continue I didn't continue working through that. So then when I go and I revisit it now, when I look at these things and I'm like, oh shit, now I remember drawing that. I had forgot all about this drawing. And then I'll try to pick up where I left off, and it's kind of gone. Like that, I don't know, that energy that I had, that momentum that I had, during that time wasn't really there. So, I mean, I could think like there's something that I really like to do is these vertical sort of block letters. And I remember the first time I ever did those, I drew it out and I was like, oh man, I really like this. Like, this is really fun to do. I really enjoy doing this. And I kept drawing that. I kept on it. And so that style, even though it hasn't like evolved a whole hell of a lot, it has evolved for me. Maybe people looking from the outside, they don't see the same progress as I do because it's really kind of in the details. But that was something that I followed through with, and I felt like it stuck. But there were so many other ideas that I didn't follow through with, and then they ended up just being gone. So once I read that and I started thinking about it, I need to try to remember to keep that in my sort of, I don't know, top of mind to remember to act on those good ideas. Because even like in my business or, you know, like I said, the podcast, all of these kind of things, those ideas, I never thought that they had a shelf life. You know, it's like you have the idea, and if you write some notes down, then you can come back in and pick back up. And it never occurred to me that it just doesn't really work like that. So there's not really a whole lot I can really talk about. It's going to be a short episode. But I thought it was cool. I think it's something that's very useful and something that anybody can pick up and apply to their life. And I'm definitely going to try to do that. So with your graph, if you have an idea, just try to work through it until, you know, keep that momentum going while you have it, instead of putting it off to the side and thinking that you're going to come back. And when you revisit it, all that energy is going to come back. It might, but like now that I'm kind of learning that other people or that this is sort of a normal thing, it's best to act on it right then and there as much as you can. I mean, obviously sometimes you can't just completely flesh something out, but I thought that was pretty cool. So I got a couple of just quick action steps, really simple stuff. And these are things that I'm going to be doing. And so getting the habit of writing ideas down, which I do, but at the same time, I think for me at least, and I would imagine for most people, make sure you're writing those ideas down detailed enough to where you work through that idea enough to where you have it kind of worked out and you can keep that momentum going. I use an app called Evernote. It's pretty cool. You can use it on your computer, on your phone, and it saves across devices and keeps things really organized. And then the other one's very simple. Just make sure you execute on your ideas as soon as possible. Like I said, that energy when you have the idea, it feels like that's when you're going to have the most amount of energy. So if you're able to execute on that idea, you know, so with graph, it's kind of complicated because a lot of times you may have an idea and you sketch it. You may not be able to just go and paint it right then, but I don't know. I'm thinking for me, at least, when I do have these kind of breakthroughs, I'm just going to try to make sure that I draw that multiple times or whatever it is that I need to do in order to keep that momentum going, because it's not going to be as strong when you go to revisit it later. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to drag it out. It's a very simple concept. And if you just keep that top of mind, you know, when you have a really good idea and you feel that energy, just try to remember, you know, that whole shit has a short shelf life, and you got to make sure you execute on it as quick as possible. All right, that's all I got. So I'll see you next week. Thank you. All right.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.